Touch the leg. Welcome to Tibettv's program on Tibet support groups. In today's edition of Introducing Tibet Support Groups, we will discuss Free Tibet Fukuoka based in Japan. To discuss Free Tibet Fukuoka, I'm joined by its founders, Mr. Hidetoshi Ishii and Mrs. Yoko Ishii from Japan. Welcome to Tibettv, Mr. Ishii and Mrs. Ishii.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, my first question is to Mrs. Ishii. Could you tell us about your organization and when and how did it come into existence?
Yes, our group name is Free Tibet Fukuoka. We are based in Fukuoka Prefecture of Japan. This group is owned by my husband and I. We've been doing activities under this group name since last fall. Originally, we were doing various kinds of activities, including support activities for Tibet. And our activities are particularly meant to support those who are fighting against the Chinese Communist Party. For example, we support Uyghurs, Mongolia, Hong Kong, and the Chinese Democrats. My husband especially has been engaged in political activities for over 2 decades. And he and I participated in the 8th International Conference of Tibet Support Groups held in Dharamshala 2019. And at the time, we attended under a different group name, and Free Tibet Fukuoka is the name we started to use last year for when we focus our activity on Tibet, because our Tibetan friends living in Japan advised us to do so. And the group name was actually given by our Tibetan friend who is the president of SFT Japan.
Okay, Mr. Ishii, could you tell us some of the major activities of your organization and how successful have they been so far?
Yes, our activities are political ones. We lobby politicians, hold protests, and appeal to the media. For example, our recent activity was a protest we held on March 10th to commemorate the 1959 Tibetan uprising. On that day, I believe many different activities were held throughout the world. In Japan, SFT Japan and the Tibetan community in Japan held a protest in front of the Chinese embassy in Tokyo. And we, as Free Tibet Fukuoka, held another in front of the Consulate General of China in Fukuoka. This means that there were protests in 2 cities of Japan. After that, we flew to Tokyo and participated in the protest on the 13th. CTL wrote about this on their website in an article. Also, back on February 4th this year, we had a press conference at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan in Tokyo. It was about the boycott of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, including the Reuters. Our press conference was reported by the media in the world. For the Beijing Olympics boycott movement, we are in close touch with the ITN, International Tibet Network. Also, I have written articles about the Beijing Olympics issue in a famous Japanese political magazine many times. I have a lot of connections with the media, so whenever I have a chance, I speak on Tibetan issues.
Okay, Mrs. Ishii, when you walk for the cause of Tibet, I'm sure there are lots of pressures coming from Chinese government. So under such a situation, how do you still manage to carry out activities for the cause of Tibet? And if your organization is pressurized, how do you challenge it?
Well, in Japan, we don't actually experience concrete oppression by China. We are protected by the Japanese law and police, and our freedom of speech is secured. Of course, we do experience some troubles. For example, we receive harassment and threatening calls often. We do have such pressure. However, that's not going to make us fear. And my husband was criticized by name in the Chinese newspapers many times, particularly pro-China newspapers in Hong Kong. They say Hidetoshi Ishii supports the independence of Tibet, Uyghurs, Mongolia, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, and thus he is a political activist plotting to separate China. And there's a website called Hong Kong Leaks, which shows a blacklist. AFP has reported that the Chinese government is involved in the making of this blacklist. There's one Japanese man who is on the list, though, and that is this man right here, Hidetoshi Ishii, my husband. And the list actually consists of 2,000 people. And many people are worried about us, but we don't fear anything. We will keep fighting.
Mr. Ishii, a Japanese parliamentary group for Tibet is the largest and quite active. So my question is, how does your organization work in collaboration with a Japanese parliamentary group in order to have your government formulate policies like US Tibetan Policy and Support Act of 2020?
Working with National Diet members closely, I exchange emails and phone calls with National Diet members on a daily basis. There's one National Diet member I talk to often. He's the Secretary General of the Japanese Parliamentary Group for Tibet. This is what's special about us among the Tibet support groups in Japan. Specifically speaking, for example, there is a water supply project going on in 8 places of Tibetan communities in India, which is delivered by the Japanese government's ODA. The cost of this project is about $200,000 US. At the very beginning of this project, the Secretary General of the parliamentary group came to me, and that's how I got to introduce an NGO to him, and the project came through. Right now, in the National Diet of Japan, our attention is focused on whether or not the National Diet resolution to condemn China's human rights oppression will be passed. Whether our diet passes the resolution or not is our critical matter. In order for Japan to make laws like America in the future, this resolution will be the foundation of that. Therefore, I'm closely getting in touch with the National Diet members and working for them. We just launched a liaison group which consists of 13 organizations from not only Tibet but also Uyghur, Hong Kong, Southern Mongolia, and so on that are oppressed by China. I represent the group and I am in charge of the negotiation with the National Diet members. About 2 weeks ago, we held a press conference inside of the National Diet building. We appealed that the National Diet must pass the resolution. Next month in May, we will be focusing on this matter.
Mrs. Ishii, as you are aware that Tibetan cause is based on non-violent path and Tibetans are seeking genuine autonomy from Chinese government based on Middleweight Approach. So question is, how important do you think is the role of Middleweight Approach for the Tibetan cause, and what is your government's stand on Middleweight Approach?
Yes, we of course know the Middleweight Approach. It's very well known, and we also are aware of its significance. We believe it's a wonderful thing that Tibetans keep appealing justice through the non-violent path. And probably this approach is the reason why we Japanese feel very close to Tibetans, because the Japanese people hate terrorism and wars. And the image of Tibet that we Japanese have is Tibet is a Buddhist country where people love peace. And as you probably know, unfortunately, the Japanese government hasn't had speeches or actions to support Tibet directly. And it's not a matter of Middleweight Approach, and it's about our government being extremely sensitive and concerned towards the Chinese government, and therefore there are National Diet members forming the group. However, our government isn't doing anything.
Okay, before we end up this discussion, I would like to ask a question to Mr. Ishii. As you know that the world is facing lots of challenges, both mentally and materially. So to tackle these challenges, how relevant do you think is the message of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama on peace, love and compassion?
We believe that the messages from His Holiness are very significant. Speaking of His Holiness, he kindly gave a visit to our town, Fukuoka, in 2018. He preached a wonderful sermon. It was a rainy day, but participants passionately listened to His Holiness, forgetting that we were getting wet by the rain. The next day, staff, including us, about 10 people, were invited to the hotel he was staying in. We were given a precious opportunity to have an audience with His Holiness. We were very emotionally touched to be with him closely. Of course, we got to have another audience with him in 2019, also during the International Conference of Tibet Support Group in Dharamsala. His Holiness is the symbol of love. Right now, in the modern era, the human race is facing huge problems spiritually, and because there are non-stop fights. The messages by His Holiness are very significant. Long live His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama.
Mrs. Ishii, would you like to respond to this question?
Oh, yes. So I was very lucky to have the audience with His Holiness myself as well. And I know how much he means to Tibetan people. And I really hope that, Tibetan people get to have their homeland back. And His Holiness is not only for Tibetans, I feel. Our Asian friends that are oppressed by China also feel that His Holiness means a lot to them. And I know that people from around the world also feel that we're like one big family, and His Holiness is a big symbol of love for us all.
Okay, thank you so much. With this, we're going to end our discussion here. I would like to thank Mr. Ishii and Mrs. Ishii for joining this program. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
Thank
for having
you.
us. Thank you.